Hi to every one of you. Yes, some more people joining, but I would say we start in time so that everybody will be off in time as well today. Thanks for tuning in. The last 2 weeks have been about our human core needs, and this week and next week it's going to be about our values, the core values that drive us. Because both are very relevant aspects of our identity, of who we are, and understanding them is as necessary as understanding our needs, because they are also drivers of our actions, of our choices, maybe not as intense or strong as our needs, or definitely not, because that can be a reason why we might end up hurting our integrity. But to, for example, to avoid hurting the integrity, it makes a lot of sense to be aware of our core values. And so I start with you and ask you the first question. Please join and give me an answer on the chat when I ask you, what are values? And we're talking about values all the time, right? But the question is, what in fact are values? What would you say? Please give me some answers on the chat. Yes, I know it always takes a little bit when I start to ask questions like that, but I'm sure there are some things coming. So, what are values? Yes, thank you. First answers coming in. The things I value in life. How would you define things? Yes, next answer coming in. The things in terms of creating my life that I find valuable for my life. And again, it's an interesting question, how to define things. The things you think that are important for you in life. Principles, yes, great, thank you. I really like that. So I don't want to grill you any longer. Oh, it seems as my screen sharing is paused. I don't know why, but it should be back. Can you see my screen? Please give me a hint. It doesn't. Yes, thank you. Good. Great. Because it's written here, my screen sharing is paused, but as I get the feedback, it is not. So there's not too much to see, but next slide is different because here I want to share with you what is it about with those core values. Values are an enduring conviction. So it's not about things that we can see, it's not about things that we can feel. Values are an enduring conviction that a certain behavior is desired or considered as good. All values of an individual, a human, a person together form an internal moral compass which strongly influences decisions and of individuals as well. And after all, an individual always wants to adhere to his or her own values as much as possible and will therefore always follow this moral compass as good as possible. So if you feel that your life is good, if your decisions, your behaviors, and your lifestyle actually correspond to your core values, that's when life feels good. And on the other hand, you will feel always that something is wrong if things and developments at work or also in private life do not match to your core values. So therefore, it's really helpful that you identify your core values and align your life according to it. Let me know if that resonates with you. Give me a hands up if that resonates with you. Or better to say, who of the participants does this resonate with? Thank you. Yeah, coming in, coming in. Yep, so that's how core values make sense to us. And I would say there is an important aspect if you ask yourself whether core values and needs, what drives first. I had a bit of a discussion about that on LinkedIn, asked people around their expertise, experts around their expertise. And in the end, the answer was very much the same by everyone, that both are important to us, but what first needs to be met are the needs. So if needs and values don't align, let's say you are a person that needs individual freedom, but you are also, which is a value, but you're also a person that has a high need of security. This is one of your driving needs, security. Then you will always first try to meet your necessity for security, and therefore might make decisions that go against your value of freedom. And in that moment that you make the decision, it feels right, but on the run, you will feel unhappy, you will feel unsatisfied, and that comes from not living aligned to your values as well, and in a way hurting integrity. So this is why it is really important to know them all. Here are some life values from A to Z, just to give you a bit of an understanding. And it's not all of them. There are way more that you could go through, that you can add here. It is just a bit of an overview to give you a little gut feeling. I would say it doesn't have a lot to do or to say that the ones from A to C or R to U are more. That is just coincidentally. What is interesting about values as well is that we have two types of values. We have social values and we have personal values. Social values are shared by most members of a society, and they are based on a so-called cultural orientation framework. Different cultures thus also have different social value systems. In Germany and Europe, for example, women enjoy equal rights to men to quite a great possible extent, whereas in the Islamic world, women still have a different position and where their rights are not equal. This is a difference in social values between Europe, Middle Europe, and the Islamic countries, for example. Individual personal values usually develop in childhood and change with increasing age. So it's not necessarily said that our values stay completely the same during our whole life. So it always makes sense to come back to the values in between and make regular checkup if something might have changed. You will find change, some of them, but if you do value tests, that there are a variety out there online, you will also find some that are repetitively in the list of your main values. And these are the ones that you can be pretty sure they will go along with you in life, and others might change. What makes us develop certain values? Belonging to a certain social class can, for example, also have a strong influence on values. So it also has to do, of course, with the life that you are born in, and personal values can present both consciously and subconsciously, and therefore influence our behavior without us knowing exactly where this behavior comes from. I think we are quite aware of some of those values, but not necessarily of all of them. And it is not self-evident that social values are in sync with the personal hierarchies of values. So we might struggle with values in the country that we live in, according to our own values. Is that something that relates with you? Let me know just if you know this experience, that you have values that might not be the core values of the social society you live in, for example, or you come from. Mm. Interesting. And that's where we are already spot on in terms of consciousness and subconsciousness and awareness of values, because an answer I get here is, oh, honestly, I need to give that some thought, and that's totally fine. So let's not dive too deep into that. I know the question um, is a tricky one, and I didn't necessarily bring it up for you to have the answer here and now, but it is a question worth to follow up with afterwards and see if that's the case, or if there might be kind of a disagreement between some of your values and the values, the social values of the society you live in. So how and what do values impact? How do values impact? What do they impact? On the one hand, values have a direct impact on the behavior of individuals. For example, in that the values define concrete assessment standards and goals, which in turn lead the individual to behave in a certain way. That's, I guess, what we described so far. This behavior should then lead to the achievement of the goals. On the other hand, values also have an indirect influence on our behaviors as individuals, in that values also influence consumers' emotions, attitudes, motivations, and involvements. These influencing factors, in turn, have a direct impact on the behavior of individuals. Let me know if that makes sense to you, this difference. Can you get what the indirect influence means and what the direct influence means, where the difference is in that? Yes, it makes sense. It makes sense. Great. So direct would mean you make a concrete assessment, have a standard, have a goal that you want to reach. Indirect means as your values influence your emotions, attitudes, some motivations, they indirectly influence the behavior. Mhm. So values are always linked to behavior in one or another. Indeed, yes, they are. They are. As I say, we can behave and act differently to our values. That is things that happen, specifically in work life a lot of times. What happens there over time is that when we do that, when we behave not in line with our values, we hurt our integrity. And in the beginning, it doesn't hurt too much. We can do that, a bit of a compromise, that's fine. But over time, we get more and more aware of it. We get dissatisfied. And the more this hurt and the violation, maybe even of our integrity, is growing, is unfolding in more ways, because we might do more things in work life, more and more things that are not aligned with our values, we really start to feel that as quite an intense pain. And I don't know, I mean, there is a saying that in Germany we call it Schmerzensgeld, which is the money that you gain for the pain that you might have had from an accident, and somebody caused that accident, and you might get money in front of the court as kind of a compensation. And I don't know if you know that many people also call their salary, in a way, kind of a compensation for the hurt and the compromises they need to make in their work life. And compromises is the one thing, right? We all need to make compromises. But if it becomes a salary that substitutes kind of a numbed way of suffering or even a hurt, then it's latest the time to listen closely where we personally, we ourselves hurt our values. So yes, values totally have to do with our behavior. And therefore, it also makes so much sense if you create an own business, if you unfold in any way of business, and also as an employee somehow. Ask yourself, what type of employee do I want to be? What type of coach do I want to be? What type of manager do I want to be? What are my important values that I want to unfold in the way I live my work life and I unfold my work life, and of course also in my own life. And it's not always easy, specifically if the social values around us have been very intense and very hugely influencing us for a long time, to really closely listen to our own values. So I think many of us know this time where we tend to walk with the herd, and from there somehow there comes the time where we feel, no, no, that's not really my direction. I need to make something different here. Another question: what makes it important to know our values? What would you say? I think we mentioned some answers already, but from what you heard so far, what would you say makes knowing your values important for you right now? Mm-hmm. Thank you. There is an answer saying, if I don't know my values, I don't know what I value in life, and so I don't really know myself. Thank you. So knowing my values is knowing more about what I value in life, and thus having the underlying feeling of knowing who we are, because we unfold life according to who we are. Beautiful. Thank you. So I would like to give you an overview and some aspects, and some I probably already have mentioned in our discussion, but there are some new ones as well. And this one links very closely to what just has been said. Because we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. Values are the lens through which we view ourselves, others, and the world. They give meaning to life. They give direction, orientation, and also strengths. One's values in life influence, as we already said, how we think, how we feel, how we act. They influence ideas, attitudes, perceptions, motivations. They give life meaning. Our values give life meaning. We invest time, money, and energy for them, and we would even give our lives maybe for some of them. And I mean, in former times, if you see when revolution has been taking place, many people were convinced of something in a way that it was relevant to them to change a political system even. Values in life are a basis for deciding what we do or let be and how we feel about it. And it's the lens through which we view ourselves, others, and the world. And they give direction and orientation, as I said, and yes, they give strength to go for something that we need to push forward to sometimes as well. If we don't know our values, if we don't know what is worth living for us, from there we don't unfold a goal and a vision to go for that is really one we follow through when things get difficult. So underlying values in a way also are part of the infusion for pushing forward in harder times. And whether you are aware of it or not, you cannot live without values. Nobody of us can. The more you know your values, the easier it is for you to live your life in accordance with them, of course. And imagine that you would have to work 70 hours a week, and at the same time, you are someone who loves family. It's quite clear that you will soon suffer from conflicts and stress. And I think that is an obvious and more of an easy example that somebody will see, I work too much, I miss my family. But you can suffer from different conflicts and stress and not be aware where it exactly comes from when you're not too aware of your values. And if you are someone who does not enjoy competition, for example, with others, and you are in a situation where there is strong competition actually, well, do you think you will find satisfaction and safety in that workplace? And we want to feel safe in the surrounding, or let's say comfortable in the surrounding that we spend our time in. So it's really important in that sense to know your values. Values are the compass in our life. Knowing them decides between orientation and disorientation. As we already said, you feel that your life is good if your decisions, your behaviors, everything corresponds with your values. And on the other hand, you will always feel that something is wrong when it's not aligning. And therefore, it's very helpful to know the values and to find out what is not aligning. And it's also good to know about opposing values, because we can have values that are not in line with each other, right? You can have the value and you can love freedom and at the same time have a huge sense and necessity for fulfilling security as well. So this is where values can clash, but also, as we know, security is also a basic need of a person, and freedom as a value might be always interfering with the need for security. So this can bring chaos in life areas if you're not aware of conflicting values and opposing values, or values opposing with the basic needs that drive you. Now I would like to give you some time to just write down for a moment, what would you say are your core values as far as you know today? Just take a moment to write that down and give me a little hint on the chat when you have finished that. And it doesn't have to be a certain number. Take the time to just note the ones that come up to you without a lot of effort. And maybe just let me know when you're ready and how many you spotted. This is always the time that I try to fulfill the power of silence. It doesn't work out all the time. But more and more of you are giving feedback that you are ready, that you have put that some up. Interesting. Others say it's hard for them to define core values because so many things that I value come up. Which value is more important than another? That's an interesting question. Yeah. So I would say the ones that come up, if it's up to 10, 10 is a not too unlikely number of things you value. So that is a range of values that we definitely all have, and we have even more. But there are tests online where you, in a really great way, can make choices between the different values that you select in the beginning as the important ones. And then there is a very structured way of selecting and balancing them out against each other so that you get an answer of the current 3 up to 4 core values that currently are the driving forces in your life. So, but I see people writing here, they have some found 5, others found 10. So there's a huge variety. But I'm happy to give you one address online where you can make one of those tests and see what values come up. And as I said, if you do a test like that repetitively, and I don't mean repetitively weekly, not even monthly, and maybe every half year or maybe once a year is fine, you will see some of the values changing also in the way they go up and down on the list, and some will stay with you up there in a very precise way. So be sure that there are ways to find out about those values, and even to find out about which are more important currently. So after knowing your values, or not knowing your values so far, or not knowing the core values, nevertheless, it's more interesting even to be aware that values, to have the best effect on our lives, they shouldn't come on their own. And this shows that it's even more important to know those values, because values always have a positive counterpart, a so-called counter value. And if a value is lived out dogmatically or exaggeratedly, it turns into its opposite. The value becomes a vice. And this seldom leads to a strengthening experience with oneself and others, but it's fraught with conflict. So for example, let's say, as you see here, your value is thrift, which is a good value, right? When you are only living out thrift as a value, and when you don't consciously practice the positive counter value, generosity, with time you will end up being greedy. With time you will end up being egoistic. And it's exactly the other way around. If you would be a generous person, which is a beautiful value, right? Which is beautiful and a gift if you do that with people. But if you don't practice saving money, if you don't consciously practice caring for money, you will end up with a negative counter value in this sense, in this quadrant of wasting. So in order to actually live the values that are particularly important to us in the best possible sense, we need to consciously apply the positive counter value, because otherwise we might end up greedy without even knowing it. We still see it as thrift and saving money in good ways, but it the scale flips around, and then we end up with a very negative outcome, which is not at all what we want most of the time. It's just what happens when we don't keep the positive counter value in mind. And so this is what makes this value quadrant so worthy. Did you know about that quadrant? Let me know, because when I dived deeper into the topic, I was really intrigued by it, but it immediately made sense to me. What do you say? Hmm. Some say they didn't hear about it, but it makes sense. Another answer here is I've heard about it, but never done it myself before, so makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so it made a lot of sense to me as well. And obviously, if you're not aware of your core values and what are your most important values in life, it's very hard for you to be aware of practicing the positive counter value. And for example, that's something, if we look at freedom, if somebody has the core value freedom and the positive counter value is obviously something like connection, or um, also like engaging with a group, being um, assimilated in a positive way, then you might end up living your freedom out in a way that it becomes egoistic as well. And that might end up in loneliness, which nobody who loves freedom in the end wants end up in. So it's an interesting balance in here. Another answer coming in here. Tricky things with some values is that they can be very subjective in terms of definitions, I find. Interesting. Can you describe that more? How do you mean that? What type of definition and in which way subjective? At some point, you might think that generosity moves over to waste, but to me, that might not be wasting money yet. Indeed, and of course, there is always a subjective angle to that. And I guess it's never about finding the perfect fit for everyone, because this is your life, indeed. And I would say, in the end, if somebody is a happy person, like from the inside out happy, when being greedy, that would not be my way. But I can't see how then the counter value of generosity would end up making him happy. But in fact, I would say with time, and there we are again at how satisfied you feel with your life and how in line you feel with your life. You will get to that point where you don't feel aligned anymore because your value there as well is out of balance. Answer another addition to the chat is it's very good to be aware of the opposite and to keep it in mind. It doesn't move to the negative. Yes, and maybe it's okay for it to move to the negative, because probably sometimes we only feel that it flipped the script, or it flipped into the counter, not the counter value even, but into the vice, when we might feel that it feels negative. But latest then, it is totally helpful to know, okay, there are things not in line. What are my values? I have the impression that I live my values. Still, there is a lot of dissatisfaction. How much do I, by the way, have the counter values in line that are part of my values, or the counter values to my main values. And latest there, you will probably find things that make even your own personal feelings out of line. Thank you for the discussion here. And I have another question for you. What do values have to do with integrity? And if you listen closely, I would say we already covered that. And so this is a bit of a repetition, but it's an important one. So I would love you to give me a little answer on that, to that. Walk your talk is the first thing that comes to mind as an answer here. Another answer is that not hearing your values and not valuing your values, the very nice expression, not valuing your values, not living them, makes you hurt your integrity. And yes, that's what I said before, because walk your talk can sound like something that you do for others, but in fact you indeed do it for yourself. And as I said, awareness of the values keeps us from hurting them due to other benefits. Acting against our values leads us to hurting our integrity, and we keep ourselves from walking our talk nicely. I didn't share those slides up front, I swear. And that leads to sub-level disappointment about ourselves. It leads to shame. It leads to decreasing self-esteem, which is an important one. We are disappointed about ourselves. Self-esteem lowers because we don't live out our truth. Decreasing trust in ourselves, which means decreasing self-confidence, because on a subconscious level, we feel that we lose our path. We get aware of that. And that is us, it's ourselves who have it in hand, but let go of those important aspects in our life. And that leads to decreasing self-confidence. And it's getting over our sources for the ikigai feeling of a basic trust in life. If you remember the session we had on ikigai, on the Easternized version of ikigai, knowing your core values is one of the most important things you need to know and you need to have your awareness about to unfold and sustain a stable and a constant feeling of a basic trust in life. Because knowing your core values, you know what activities, what things to bring to your life that give you this ikigai feeling. And from cultivating this ikigai feeling grows this basic trust in life. So this is what makes it very, very important to stick to our core values and to get aware that we, as much as we can, unfold them in line with our integrity. Of course, there's always compromises in life, but the balance is to not keep, to not leave our integrity too much out of the focus. And living aligned with our core values is one of the most important aspects for a self-confident life, actually. And this is how I would love to leave you for today. Make the test and find out more details which values are your important drivers for creating life in authenticity and confidence. And check the community thread for access to the test. As I said, I will put it in there, and I know the one of the other person is in here today that has been in the Ikigai session where we did the value test, and the answers of today give me the awareness that the people might not have done that value test in that session or might have forgotten about the results again. So it's worth to do it a second time. Do the test, find your answers, and feel free to reach out with questions, and let's discuss the insights in the community. Any further additional comments from you on this topic so far? It stays silent. Thank you. Was super interesting. Another comment here. So I am happy and I thank you that you took the time to be here with me. Thank you very much. I hope you got a lot out of it. And as I say, there is so much value actually in knowing your core values that I definitely would say, please do the test and enjoy the results. And yeah, as I say, let's share. Thank you very much. Wish you a great evening. See you soon. Goodbye.